Okay, so yesterday we took a trip to Rutgers and to their horse farm and some other parts of their agricultural program. And this video will concentrate mostly on animal husbandry. First of all, I'd like to thank the Rutgers Cooperative Extension as well as the Somerset County 4-H Club and the people at Rutgers itself for setting up this trip. And one thing you won't see in the video clips, but it was there, it was a fairly large pasture at the horse farm. And talk a little bit about how that pasture is set up and what the importance of that pasture is. So the horse farm was set up as a research facility, and pastures in general, and this pasture as well, do keep down costs. We have to think about farming as a business, because it is. So how do we minimize costs like that? Well, if they just eat what's out there, and it's good enough. And that depends upon the animal units per acre. So you do need to think about how many animals you can actually have. But that would be a lot cheaper than bringing them food, right? So they employ methods like rotational grazing, and we're going to talk about that as well and what they do a little bit later. I have another video for that in a different location. Same farm, different location. But at the horse farm, they do that. And what they also have is they collect all the runoff, including from the pasture as well as the building. And I'll show you some of the gutters that pipe directly into a rain garden. And this can help to purify the water. Think about cultural eutrophication, how much nitrogen would be in horse manure, for example. And that would be a problem, and phosphorus would be as well. So we want to, and just cleaning up that tainted water, if you will, from whatever was on that pasture land. So we're going to take that and purify a bit before it goes out into the regular environment with a rainwater garden. What you can see is that these gutters coming off the building go directly into pipes that feed that rainwater garden. Also, what you'll see in this concrete structure I'm about to show you is that's where they pile the manure. So you need somewhere to put the manure, right? They put it right there, and they're going to turn it into compost. They do more of a passive compost technique, but you can do active or passive composting, of course, with active meaning you're going to turn it over a bit more, and passive meaning you don't do as much with it during the process. They do add some wood chips to control the density as well. So that's what they do there. They're explaining it is not as costly to build as it might be for an experimental station like that for an individual farmer. You can see it's a pretty simple construction.
So like now this is the stress zone because there's shelter and wood. It's a giant stress.
Everything is really thought out. You think about a farm and you might not realize if you're not familiar with farming, and this is a research station as well, but everything is really thought out. And then cost is a factor all the time. So what you'll see is the fencing here. If you just use the exclusionary fencing, which they have, where it's pretty difficult for anything to really get through because they're triangular, but it's metal and wooden posts. As opposed to, hey, listen to that. Yes, I'm in a school. As opposed to, in my school, by the way, as opposed to, let me start that over, having the electric tape fences, which are plastic and portable. And they have quite a bit of those. And I did ask the question, can birds actually tolerate them and stand on top of them? And yes, they can. So they can perch on top of them. I did see bobolinks there. There are grassland species on farms. And that's important to think about as too if you're thinking about conservation.
Yes. That is spray foam.
Another thing you see at this horse farm is this bioswale, which they have a natural place for it. Think about hydrology. Bioswale is meant to take water, collect water, and to purify it through the vegetation that lives in it. And it does. And the reason it can collect the water is because of hydrology. Again, water goes downhill. So this place is the lowest point in the area from both sides of the farm, kind of comes to like a little valley, if you will. And if that naturally exists, you exploit that, you use that, and then you can use that to purify the water coming off the pastures yet again.
So this bioswale runs all the way out to that far hedgerow, and the water works its way down. There's a little dam here that holds it back. Once it spills over, it comes through to this side.
So what you're going to see in the next clip are agrivoltaics. And agrivoltaics are solar cells that are combined in the same location with agriculture. So we can have pasture land right there with the ability to produce electricity that we can put into the grid and sell. Now that depends upon the infrastructure, how much we can actually put back into the grid, how much they'll be able to take, especially in a rural location, that may be a problem. But this gives the farmers another source of income where they're diversifying their income sources, which is important, right? So they're diversifying their income sources, being able to get some energy that does not negatively impact their primary product, which would be the cows in this case. Now, what you may not notice is a couple of things about these cells. At this location, they're testing to see what height is optimal and the spacing that's optimal. Think about the shadow that they can create. Think about the amount of land that's necessary for the cows as well. Think about even the shadows underneath and how that impacts the grass for the grazing, not just the solar cells impacting each other by being too close together and maybe casting a shadow on themselves. There's a lot here that really hasn't been done before. And yeah, it does vary, but with latitude and seasonally. So that's also something else to consider if you're doing a project like this. They do have the ability to move the cows away in and out of the area. And there's some spots for that they can be happy and safe. And as the researchers go in and monitor things for a day or two, and that's done. Also, in case you don't want to overgraze the area, there's a pasture right next to it without solar cells.
Put in the last couple of years, there's 3 different sites. One is up in Pittstown, New Jersey. That one, they're growing hay. They have solar panels that are like...
This is an illustration of rotational grazing. And you can see that there are different animals in different pastures. And what you also do with rotational grazing is you have them ungrazed for some time, especially to avoid overgrazing. And this can be different areas. The amount of animal units per acre varies as well with the material that you have for them to graze on and the location and soil type and all of that. Again, you want to reduce erosion. You want to make sure that we don't overgraze and that the animals are well taken care of and fed. It's harder to do that with the cattle that you see here than it is with the other animals. So that is a bigger concern from an economic standpoint.
15 breeding cows, which means we have approximately 30 to 35 cattle that eat a lot of pasture. We talked about animal units being 1,000 pounds per acre.
So the cows you see in this are research cows again, and we're looking at, particularly if you see the one with the port in its side, take a look at that. So we're looking to see how well digested different nutrients are. Different diets can impact the cows in different ways. So if you feed them one thing, you feed them something else, how well is it really being digested? You can't ask the cow because they don't really talk. I mean, they make a lot of noise, and you see that in the video, but they don't talk per se. They can't, how, Mr. Cow, does that feel good in your stomach? No, okay. So we actually go inside the cow and reach into its rumen where it's being digested and take a look and see what is digested better and what's digested worse. So you're doing a lot of work on the diets of cows, and it's not just preference, but or it's not just what they will eat, but it's also what's good for them and how well they digest it, as I just mentioned before. They do seek out dandelions in fields, and the dandelions are high in vitamin A, so they're doing some research on that to see really how well that works. And again, not really as a full-time diet, but maybe a supplement. Also, you don't have to spray and use pesticides, which is a bad idea anyway. Get rid of these dandelions from your pasture. Actually leave them. They'll eat them and they're good for them. So think about it as a business. You want things that are good for your cows so that they grow better and also cost effective. So we do have a lot of waste in this world. What can we do with that?
But we do have somebody put their hand in your stomach, you wouldn't feel it. So just see cows, you see them like laying in the field chewing. Okay. So they eat first and then they digest later. They just eat. They go.
For example, some companies have a lot of food waste. We could talk about breweries, and they have different kinds of grains that they use, and maybe they have extra grain that we want to somehow get rid of. The thing with that is, though, it needs to be cost effective in transportation. Transportation uses a lot of fossil fuels, and it's costly. So we need to think about that at all times, too. They do enjoy, chickens, from what they were saying, enjoy a lot of these grains from the brewery. But again, you can't really feed much on them. So maybe it's a supplemented treat here and there for some of the animals, including the cows. Things like soy pulp and other kinds of pulp, but soy pulp is our car, can be nutritious, but how long does it stay around as well? Well, they've done studies on that, and it seems like salt is a good preservative to extend it to 2 weeks instead of 1 week. All this stuff goes to waste. So if you can use, especially on your farm, if you're also growing cows, that's a good idea. It's not always possible, but you want to see how well it impacts their diets, how digestible it is, and what you really feasibly can do. The gardens that you see were a berry garden, an herb garden. There's actually a conservation garden as well for native plants that are around. And this is part of the Harvest Cafe at Rutgers.
But when you're doing anything every year, you're constantly going for more than 1 year, so you have to get the plants down. And so we're slowly building this.